See that serious guy? That's me. My name's Lucas, a home vegetable gardener who is about to rise to the challenge of planting a half-acre vegetable garden. Here's how I did it. The first step was to cut holes into the black plastic mulch. To keep them straight down the row, I stuck a flag into the ground with some baling twine attached to it. I pulled the string straight across the center of the rows and pinned it down at the other end with a rock. Since the mulch rows were sometimes curved, I used clumps of dirt to hold it in the middle where necessary. I would then look at my inventory and plants, and based on the number of plants of each variety I had and the spacing requirements for that plant, I would calculate the distance apart each hole should be. See, this is some really high-tech stuff. I placed an expensive kitchen bowl about a foot from the edge and carved the first hole. Then I measured the distance I calculated from that first hole and just repeated this process until the rows were finished. Finally, I would rip out the plastic circles and move on to the next step. So the next thing I did was use a twisty cultivator thing to loosen up the soil. The chunks of grass in the soil were not fun to deal with, let me tell you. Then I used a trowel to further loosen up the dirt and get rid of any grass that would get in the way of planting. Because this soil was only tilled to a depth of about 4 inches, this was a very time-consuming process because I needed to plant in soil, not rock. If I were to do a big garden project like this again, I would definitely get it plowed. Next, I would grab a tomato plant and snap off the lower branches. Don't worry, this is a standard tomato planting technique because roots will readily grow along the stem, and more roots usually equals more fruits. You can see this plant has a good root system and was not root bound in its 9-ounce cup. Because the soil is so shallow and the plants are very tall, I'm planting them trench style. This means laying the stem on its side and bending the top of the plant up. I firmed the soil around the plant and watered it in with a couple cups of water. Now it was just a matter of repeating this process over and over again until all the rows were planted. Easy, right? When watering the plants with cups, I would have to keep going back to the truck and refilling my bucket, and that took a lot of time. Also, I decided I wanted to add some fertilizer into this water to really get these plants off to a good start. But because I have a minimal amount, I would not have nearly enough using this method. So I realized that by soaking the roots of the plants in a bucket of fertilizer solution, I could give them the water and nutrients they needed and get them planted faster. I used a solution of 15-30-15 bloom booster fertilizer for this because it's high in phosphorus and that'll help to avoid transplant shock and get the roots off to a really strong start. At this point, I had a ton of seedlings at my house. These plants were basically begging me to get them planted. But there's only so much one guy can do at a time. By June 3rd, I had about 85% of my tomatoes planted. It was a very tiresome task, but I knew I just had to keep going. Rome wasn't built in a day, and my half-acre garden certainly wasn't either. Although I'm still growing a home garden this year, having a huge quantity of plants is quite a cool new experience for me. I've always dreamed of having a garden filled with productive vegetable plants as far as the eye can see. Will this farm fulfill that dream? In reality, probably not. The soil was just not cooperating with me. It was chock full of dried grass and hard to dig in most locations. But that won't stop me from trying. The tomatoes looked okay so far, but the quality of the soil and my watering routine is really what's going to tell the tale of how well this garden will perform. Even though I did soak the roots with a fertilizer solution when I planted them, that's not enough. They still need some more water, so I took my tank back to the farm and I watered them in with the hose and the nozzle. If you're wondering exactly how this setup works, I made a video all about it. If you're interested, I posted the link down in the description below, so go take a look after this video. Taking a look at the pumpkins, they were alive but not looking great by any stretch of the imagination. They clearly hadn't grown much since I planted them over a week ago. The leaves were yellowing and the cotyledons were shriveling up. Although I wasn't overly optimistic at this point, I saw a groundhog poking out of its home, which was pretty funny, you gotta admit. Look at this guy. At this point, I was just plain confused. The soil is clay, not sand, but it was as dry as a desert at the half acre. I was counting on rain to give me a helping hand in watering, but it just didn't deliver. The plants were wilting and looking quite sad, and the high winds certainly weren't helping matters. I guess this area of land is highly subjected to wind, possibly because of it being up on a hill and in an open field. So out to the farm I would go with the water tank and water the plants one by one with the hose. A drip irrigation system would keep this garden growing on autopilot, but that just wasn't in my budget for this project. A few days later, I drove to the half-acre garden. We had got a bit of downpour during the night, so I was hoping that would do some good for the plants. I half expected the plants to be shriveled up in their planting holes, but what I saw when I got there was an absolute surprise. Needless to say, this newfound hope gave me a shot of adrenaline and inspired me to finish planting the entire garden. I started laying out the pepper plants with deliberation at their planned locations. I had it in my mind I was going to make this garden happen. I loosened up the soil in each hole with the cultivator thing. I was unstoppable, on fire, but I didn't need a fire truck. All I needed was to succeed. I started planting the peppers one by one. The hot afternoon sun was quick to arrive to make my life difficult, but with a single vision in mind, I forged ahead. I saw this funny bird walking around my garden. I think it was a pigeon. It had wings, and I didn't. But that wouldn't stop me from flying high. By June 13th, I had most of the garden planted. Tomatoes, peppers, pumpkins, squash, and cucumbers were in the ground. Everything was looking decent, except most of the tomato plants looked like they were lacking something. They needed a kick in the pants, a healthy dose of nutrients to get them growing in the right direction. So, I got some 3-18-18 concentrated fertilizer and mixed it with the water in the tank. This fertilizer is high in phosphorus and potassium, but low in nitrogen, perfect for the fruiting crops I'm growing. The mix rate I used was approximately 1 liter per 20 gallons of water, according to the instructions. The pump circulated the mixture, creating a root beer colored brew that would hopefully be healthier for my plants than root beer is for me. Instead of using the nozzle this time, I just filled up 3 buckets and my dad and I watered each plant with a tall cup. When the buckets were empty, I would go back to the truck, switch it on, and refill them. This process was repeated until the thirst of the entire garden was quenched. So time caught up to me, and unfortunately I didn't get everything planted. But that's okay. I've still got more than enough plants for an amazing harvest. If they grow well, that is. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a like to motivate me to keep pushing ahead with this half-acre garden. Thanks for watching. I'm Lucas from LucasGrowsBest, and I'll see you next time.